So we'll go ahead and get started. Hey everyone, good afternoon. My name is Nan, and today we're going to be talking about data warehouse transformation using Snowflake. Uh, Quite a few attendees here, and I see some more are joining. So let's get started from an agenda standpoint. So the context is really how do we pursue in an advanced state of data and analytics, right? What is the current state from a technology standpoint? Why should we even modernize? And what are some of the benefits and technologies, right, that are out there as we consider modernization? We'll take about 20 minutes there, and then we'll look at Snowflake, which is an awesome building block, and I'm excited to talk about it. Give you an introduction to what it is, some technology advantages, and if you decide to explore, what might be a great set of steps. And then we'll have some time for discussion, about 15 minutes, any questions, and we'll be available for offline discussion. So really quick, I would like to introduce our presenters. Greg Fritz, he's VP of our Data Solutions, over 30 years of technology experience. He handles a lot of data implementations for us. Tarun, he's our data solutions architect, quite competent in cloud technology. Snowflake falls within his purview, and myself. Nan, as you see, I have a much complex first name. Nan is my user-friendly name. So let's go get started. Quick intro to Core Strategics. We help organizations go digital. So going digital is not so much of a new concept today, especially with all of the COVID and how digital is being accelerated across the board. And we've been lucky to work with all of these customers, and we treasure the opportunity here. Been around since 2006, a boutique team here with engineering centers in Bangalore as well. So we operate both from a strategy standpoint and execution standpoint. A lot of our consultants start with strategy. We define that, and then go on to implement it, maintain it for you, or turn it over to your IT teams as well. So we do quite a bit of data analytics work, building out digital platforms, quite a bit of digital commerce implementations as well. Experienced design team, engineering delivery in our Bangalore center, and we're also a Microsoft Azure partner, Snowflake partner, a range of other technology partnerships as well, through which we bring our competencies. So that's a bit about us. So going into the webinar itself, my phones are muted. If you have any questions, please capture them in the Zoom chat window. We'll make a recording of this webinar also available here shortly. So let's take a look at the overall context of digital transformation, because that's really the framework within which you would explore why I should go modernize my data and analytics footprint. What benefits am I going to get? How do I go about doing this? Is it a huge investment? Is it, calculated, measured investments? These are the type of questions that come to mind as we work with customers, right? So, but we have developed our own type of a framework. Culture is at the core of anything that pertains to digital transformation. So if you look at that, then we look at these 5 different lenses. Customers, right? They are demanding new ways to consume your product or services. Whether you have a software product or not, right? Even physical products, there is a digital component to that, right? If you're selling a machinery, there's an IoT side to it. Or if you're selling a printer, is there a way to, figure out whether the customer is out of ink or not, right? So there's a whole digital aspect to that that's developing, and expectations are also getting to that point where customers expect, don't, let me have to ask you what I want, just figure it out and serve me at the right point. Then there are competitors making moves on you from a digital standpoint, innovation, right, in your own industries and landscape. There's an explosion of data. This is one of the central topics we'll explore today. And then you've got business models, right? New business models that are developing. What used to be a capital intensive model may just be an expense driven, pay as you go type models, right? So taking all these different pillars, right, from a transformation standpoint, you can frame your own very unique digital strategies. And they usually tend to fall in three distinct categories. First one is what I call as a systems of record. And inside that, right, you've got your ERP systems, order management, accounting, and financial systems. And you tend to modernize that inside of a transformation where you consolidate systems, you go buy best of breed systems, and make sure they are interconnected. They're not an island by itself. So all these systems talk to each other. So you can make changes rapidly, preferably on the cloud, and you have lower total cost of operating these systems. So that's what a systems of record transformation would involve. There's a second category. We call that systems of engagement. They are like current systems, right? Current state, like websites, applications that are facing your customers. You may have e-commerce systems. You may have mobile apps with very specific purpose. And then you can transform those things as well. You're modernizing those applications, bringing very digitally savvy user experiences. And then in most cases, right, where you don't have an application, you're essentially creating a digital twin. So I have a product today, right? It's a physical product. Think of it as a machinery that I'm selling. Is there a digital twin or an equivalent to that I can develop and sell in a packaged form? So that I can collect more data, I can serve the customer in completely different ways, unlock new digital revenues that was not there before, and also create some competitive advantages that prevent other competitors from taking away your market share. So this creating a digital twin is an interesting conversation, and we have fun with these conversations where you can understand what they do traditionally for their core business and create a digital equivalent of that. And so in doing so, right, you enter a mode where you create products for yourself, right? And so you're not necessarily creating your core products and services that you make money today. You also tend to have a software product. And so that requires very unique competencies. But that's all in the realm of systems of engagement. The third bucket is systems of insight. The focus of this webinar is a system of insight today. And traditionally, you've got data warehouses, you've got reporting systems, integration systems, and maybe some visualization systems like Cognos. All these are current state usually in companies today. If you take that and if you transform, you are looking at a cloud-based implementation. You're looking at very advanced artificial intelligence, machine learning models that not only tell you, what happened, but what's going to happen in future, right? So it gives you some defensive proprietary data sets and models from a competitive standpoint. So it basically transforms how you do business. So that's what we are going to focus right now in the next few slides. But basically, this is the warehouse is within a structure of a larger transformation, which you may already be in a journey like this. If not, this is something you ought to consider. Where are our systems of record? Where are our systems of engagement, and then insights? So the context today is you may have an existing data warehouse. You may be looking to implement in more advanced or build a maturity from an analytics standpoint, or you may be considering, what we do, we don't have necessarily a warehouse. We have some reporting that's in our ERP systems. We make do with that. But there's all this, conversation around what data and analytics can do for us, right? So we're considering entering that, or we have a Power BI or Tableau implementation, so we are exploring that. Most people tend to equate data and analytics strategy to implementing a Power BI and a Tableau type reporting. They give you some capabilities, but that's not entirely what we are talking about. We'll explore that a little bit more in the next few slides. So The context today, you're taking time to attend this webinar. There's over 50 of you today. So it's not misplaced, the time that you're spending to understand. 45% of the market is looking to implement some form of business intelligence today. And last year, there were quite a bit of improvements in the core systems of record. That is somewhat strong, right? Here it's third highest. Security always, is one of the top two things, as you see, and it's a necessary requirement. But the key here is, market trend is in a similar direction as well. So let's take a look at what might exist inside your footprints today. If you have one, you've got all these operational systems, ERP systems. You've got your data warehouse, that drives some form of visualization, maybe a few applications, and definitely reports, operational reports. Your CFO would want these reports at a regular or not specified time so they can run the business. No different than the fuel gauge on your car, right? Do I have enough gas or not, right? Am I going to make the travel this month, in this quarter, this year? That's really what these reports are driving. And so usually analysts, finance is most interested in that. And some companies have bolted on business intelligence. That's Power BI, Tableau, Cognos, and variety of those things. It makes the uh, the difficult task of looking at spreadsheets easier, right? It sort of creates a insight that is easy to glean and take action upon. CFOs usually drive that, and there's business analysts attached to that piece. Within the footprint itself, you may have what we call as ETL, extract, transform, unload. So you get data in one form, you want it to be rendered in another form. So these ETLs do it. So usually at the end of the month, end of the day, overnight, that's the frequency at which it does. So you need a scheduler to automate all that. These are the typical components inside your footprint. You may have multiple data warehouses, you may have data marts, you may have some databases that run some applications. They're all like variations of this particular footprint. So this is your common footprint, right? So what does that footprint give you, right? Is essentially it's letting you operate in what we call as mode one, right? The focus is on predictability, right? Making sure business is going as per what you intended to go, and systems are all having uptime, stability, requirements are clear, and so on. So this is about understanding what has already happened, but there's a need, or there is actually an opportunity for a mode two way of operating. A lot of you may have explored Agile as a software development mechanism and may have even implemented Scrum on other aspects, right? So it kind of brings this explorative, you can take quick left or right turns as need be. It's exploratory. You can make hypotheses and confirm. Your requirements are evolving in nature. You go at it in rapid iterative cycles. So blending these two gives you what I call as a bimodal, and there's tremendous advantages to that. This is actually what lets you tap into newer opportunities, different revenue models. It has predictability, but also gets you speed. And so operating in bimodal is a good thing, right? And you want to pursue that in as you frame your digital strategy or data strategy. But to do that, right, you need platforms and capabilities that let people operate both in mode one and two. You talk to IT and they might, you may have a conversation there for them to go try out something new. They usually only take a tried and tested path, right? Unless you have a mode two component that you developed, you can't just go to them and say, hey, start trying this out, and you will get some pushback. So you have to give them some capabilities and a conversation where they tend to become more bimodal in nature. So existing legacy footprint, gives you mode one. Mode two will give you, requires a newer footprint. That's kind of the thesis statement for this slide. So if you look at mode one, mode two from an analytic standpoint, right? Today, most of the analytics and reports are written by IT people, right? They're consumed by the business folks. They're very structured. They need to be identified at the time of development. Somebody develops it and somebody consumes it, right? So the producer of the report and the consumer is like fairly, fairly defined, right? And so they're published, scheduled and distributed. They're usually defensive in nature, and it gives you about a review perspective from an analytic standpoint. It's like as you're driving, you look at the review mirror of all the things that's happening. You can't control what's happening in the review mirror. It's already happened. That's what you find out in these reports. SSRS, Crystal reports, Cognos, Web Focus, all fall under mode one. So they give you some blended, or some might actually bridge mode two, but majority they fall in mode one. Mode 2, on the other hand, is what you want today. It needs to have some open-ended nature. I don't know what report I want, but I may have a hypothesis. I need to be able to go build a report quick. I can't wait a day or two, right? In matter of hours, I need to have that capability. And that kind of ideas don't come from IT, right? IT are systems focused. Business folks are, externally focused. They are the ones who come up with that idea. So it needs to support that. And I'd like to collaborate as well between a couple of other folks, right? So these systems are to be collaborative, especially today. We're all working from homes, right? We don't want systems like locked up where I have to access from a particular place, and then I have to attach it to my email and send it to you, right? So that creates friction. So you want to avoid that. And agile, self-serve, and this is where you create some offensive strategies, right? You can drive some revenue, some competitive advantages. You can drive some forward-looking aspects, what's going to happen, and change those outcomes to be more conducive. Power BI, Azure Data Lake, Snowflake are all great examples of Mode 2 type implementation. So we'll take a look at those in the next few slides. Really going from your legacy system, you're really good at descriptive. What happened? You can bridge this gap through your own analysis and interpretation, right? This is human bridging going on to take a decision and act on it. And some of you may have diagnostic, why did it happen? But still, this is in the past, right? So the bridging is lesser to decide and act on it. But with new systems, we're talking about what will happen and what should I do about it. All of those things, right, require less human bridging or more advanced capabilities. That's what you're really exploring from a modernization standpoint today. So what does modern analytics footprint look like? If we looked at legacy, and there are some advantages for mode 1 to mode 2 becoming bimodal, and all of the analytics and the maturity model, right? What does modern analytic footprint logically looks like? So let's take a quick look at that. You got your data sources. They are pretty standard here. The one thing I'd like to point out are these IoTs, right? You've got a machinery that's spewing out a lot of sensor data, right? You've got a refrigerated truck, you're measuring temperatures every minute, right? So all those are data points, and there's a lot of that happening today. There's explosion of data. And you have mechanisms to acquire that data. In the legacy system, they were fairly structured, and data came in a particular format and it was easy. Not so easy today. You have to acquire it in real time and at huge volumes. And the data may not be structured. Sometimes it may be scan data, it might be camera pictures, maybe camera snapshots. So there's X-ray data. So there's all kinds of data that's coming in that you want to capture. And then there are data stores that need to be able to house all that unstructured, structured, semi-structured data inside and just manage that, right? If something, there needs to be some degree of fault tolerance, and it needs to scale itself. It needs to be cost effective. Those are your data lakes. Finally, data lakes are like a lake with a body of water. You can't just take that and drink it. It's not consumable. So you have to do some work and put it into small containers or your bottles, right, of water ready for drinking. That's really what those are. That is where your data warehouse comes in. This is your legacy data warehouse today. So see, it's addressing a very small use case of data, right? Just to operate your business. But what we are talking here is a much larger use case that gives you some unique competitive capabilities as you drive your strategies forward. So this is where you are, and these things feed into a potential data warehouse. It may be a graph database, maybe hierarchical databases, data marts, or APIs, right? That basically drive some self-serve analytics. Your spreadsheets may still exist. Power BI, Tableau may be there. And you may have applications. Usually applications are input output. You input something and on the other side somebody consumes it. It's not adding intrinsic intelligence to those interactions. Now you can write some AI, machine learning type models, where applications may make a recommendation. You're building a home, and this home is likely to be complete in October. But then, based on the weather and hurricanes, it might say, your propensity to complete this or score is only about 70%. You click on it, it'll show you all the dates on which some things might clash. So you take care of that, and now you've got a home you can build faster. So that's what the new capabilities would give you. Finally, you have your own data science team, right? Once you know you've got this data set and all of that, you can go hire a data science person, right? And they can write models for you. So you can come up with hypothesis and prove it out, whether it's true or not. And if it is, then you can act on it. So these are the components of a modern analytical footprint that we are targeting, right? And as we take this journey from legacy to more of a modern footprint. So going to next slide, takes a few clicks here. You might say, in all of this, you know what? I don't see our company having that much of data. You talk about, all kinds of IoT and streaming data. That's not true, right? You take any company today, the society is evolving and all the mechanisms and the expectations are evolving. As a function of that, the data volumes are evolving and the data variety is evolving. So let's take a look at this, right? Every company has web data from their own websites, and they've got partners and who they work with, they buy from. They've got data sets. You've got operational data sets, which is your ERP systems and CRM systems, financial, all of that. You've got open data sets from government, right? Everybody has consumers, and there is, data sets that government makes it totally open for anybody to consume. We don't even look at it today because that's extra effort, right? But those are all like when you bring it together in easy ways, make it available to your analysts, you're going to open up a whole bunch of possibilities that you never thought of before. You've got social media and you're doing campaigns if you're directly working with consumers. And then finally, dark data, right? You've got data sets that's only accessible by one or two people. Think email, right, is a great example. So these are all different types of data sets. But in addition to that, IoT, we talked about, these are like things where you've got sensors or you've got cameras or you've got things which are spewing off a lot of data sets. Finally, you got what I call as the data exchanges are becoming more defined. An example of a data exchange is much more like your app store on your phone. You go in there, you find an app that meets your need, right? Like that, you go in there and you go search for data sets and you can buy it quickly and then you can, use it. An example looks like this, where you got different data sets. For example, here you can see real-time urban mobility data. Kind of gives you a perspective of where all electric chargers are there, right? And it might give you a COVID data sets, right? Where is COVID spreading? How are localities responding to that? What kind of restrictions they have? All those data sets are available. A couple of our customers are using that data set to drive these decisions to see where their business will be impacted across the country. So it's a completely new capability that may not be possible with legacy footprints. So we went from what is legacy to what does a modern footprint look like and kind of why you need to go there. But here are some benefits, right? As you go to a modern footprint, you can go from descriptive to more predictive, right? There are industry specific use cases. So we do this research. Given your industry, what are those advanced use cases, right? We can work with your domain expert and kind of blend these cross-functional thinking and bring those cross-pollination of ideas and kind of define those use cases. Finally, faster exploration to action cycles. end-to-end analytics, and contextual delivery. If I give you an insight at the point where it matters, you're going to act on it. That context is very important. So these modernization, right, or the new frameworks let you do that. Directly push a message to your phone, or you can pull up a visualization on your phone at the right time. Finally, tap into marketplaces. We talked. Comprehensive data strategies that drive sort of bimodal capabilities. We talked about those things as well. So if you're looking at those are the benefits, you want to keep these things in mind as you approach it, right? So it needs to be deployed on a cloud. I don't think it's a good idea to build data footprints in premise anymore, right? You're not going to get certain advantages that you will get here. So ideally, you shouldn't be locked into a cloud as well. Although we are a Microsoft Azure partner, we love that. And Snowflake works on Azure really well. We love that as well. But you don't want necessarily a cloud lock-in from your point of view, because there's different value each clouds offer, right? And having a hybrid is a good thing. Enabling collaboration, right? You don't want to create these silos. You want the solution to be open-ended and collaborative in nature. It has to support different types of data forms, semi-structured, unstructured, image, and all of that type of data as well. Finally, you want a data utility model. A data utility model is where, think of utility, right? I take a laptop and my charger, I go into a meeting room, I plug it in, and it charges my laptop. My expectation that electricity will flow and charge my laptop is very high, right? It's highly reliable, where similarly, right, a marketing function or a finance function and operations comes to you with a data set with their own data scientist at some point in the future, you should be able to deliver that data set instantly. That's really the utility model we are talking about. Any consideration that you give to a new footprint should support that data utility model with appropriate data quality, data governance, and all of those things, right? You should be able to tap into other products as well, like Tableau, Power BI, and other things should be able to plug in to your footprint easily. So you can tap into the best of breed systems out there. Finally, you should be able to do all these things faster. We call this the OODA loops, right? You observe, orient, decide, and act. These loops are big, so it takes time, days, weeks, months even to make those decisions. We want it all compressed to hours and minutes, right? So that's what a new footprint has to do. So without an overarching data strategy, right, there are too many options. Data strategy is not equal to selecting Power BI or Tableau. They are two distinct things. Selecting Power BI or Tableau is a task inside of a larger framework, right? Without that, you're making decisions in a very open-ended way. And you might make one which may require course correction. And so, there may be some expenses there. So you want to avoid that. So that's where we kind of, prescribe this framework. Capture your organization's priorities first. What is your data-driven vision? What should it sound like? It's usually a one statement. You capture that aligns with the priorities. Finally, you identify propositions. We have about 13 different types. One or more of those might make sense for your organization. What are those? You capture those things. Then you look at what data assets you have. What can you tap into from a third-party standpoint? And then basically look into talent, processes, and ops, right? And then look at the technology. And then as you do this, right, you come up with the capabilities and gaps. What you have, where you want to go, what are the gaps? Then you go and build out a footprint. So that's a framework that serves as a guideline for any of the decisions that you make. So I'm excited here now to talk about Snowflake, right? How Snowflake can be a great building block in as you transform your legacy footprint to the new footprint. So, Snowflake operates here. You definitely can't use yesterday's technology to solve today's data problems, and definitely not tomorrow's, right? While all of the world is evolving, your organization also needs to evolve. And so that's where this particular building block comes in. So I'll turn this over to Greg and Tarun to take it from here and walk us through what Snowflake's capabilities are.
Thanks, Ann. So Nan is the master of analogy, so I'm going to beg your forgiveness for one more analogy that kind of struck me the last couple of days as we were pulling together this webinar. So many years ago, 10 plus years ago, I put up crown molding in our kitchen. And at the time I was using a hammer and finish nails and, meticulously driving nails, and actually to keep from splitting the wood, I was having to drill every hole first. And then I was I had to go back at every one of them and fill in. And we're now getting our kitchen redone. And since that time, I was lucky enough to go out and buy a new tool. That's it, a tool, a pneumatic brad nailer. So as I was putting up the molding this time, it was pop, 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 and covered up, and I was done. And so how that applies is I got to thinking, that really is technology solving a problem that made me so much more efficient, got the job done quicker, and then I could go do other things that I really needed to get done. And in many ways, again, apologizing for the quirky analogy, but that's what Snowflake does for you, right? Snowflake is a technology solution, but what it does is it solves your business problems in terms of your data and analytics strategy and your BI. And so that's what we're going to kind of talk to. And Nan touched on a lot of these things, and I'm going to try to tie them up into how Snowflake addresses them. So we're going to go on a little bit of an evolution discussion here. So next slide, to get you to set the stage for what Snowflake provides. So again, we've talked about the rise of the cloud. There's really three things here in technology that are changing how we use data. There's the rise of the cloud, right, which was basically giving us unlimited, near unlimited capacity, maybe unlimited, in terms of both compute and storage. So that's removed the infrastructure type of constraints that previously existed. The second, of course, and Nan's touched on this, is the explosion of data, right? With IoT, mobile, social media, whatever. There's just this massive amounts of data that's available today that 5 years ago even wasn't even there. So there's all this data, and then the diversification of analytics, right? So now there's all this data. Now we're going, great, what do we do with it? So it's not only has it really created a whole new stream of expertise in terms of what we do with the data, and things like data science, so we could get the predictive type of answers out of it that Nan talked about. But it's really pushed the users of data down to a lower level, right? Arguably, everyone today is involved with data in some way to do their job. So those three things have kind of set the stage. So next slide, please. Right. So the goal of all this, of course, is to make better, quicker business decisions. And to do that, it behooves us to have that data accessible and in one place, so it's easier to manage, and so that it's easier to impart data governance, so that we ensure that we have quality of data. And then the next thing is, right, the reduction of cost and the scaling management. So again, the infrastructure issues have started to go away. So the more we can reduce our costs, that goes to not only the infrastructure, but towards the efficiency and the speed of the data access, frees up those dollars so that we can invest them in the third area here, which is how do we make a better customer experience using all of this data that exists today. So kind of this journey that we're talking about is, many years ago, your data warehouses, your data projects really started generally local. It's on premise. We might have had a database, but it was generally, it was a SQL database because, that was ubiquitous and everyone knew SQL. So we built these databases, and, probably it was localized for a certain set of data who were really into the data at the time, right? And then came the cloud, and the cloud pretty much was an infrastructure play. Like I said, it was really removing some of the physical limitations of storage and compute. And so most of these same systems kind of moved to the cloud, but they didn't really change much. They were still siloed. You might have had multi-siloed like Nan talked about, and using the SQL databases. Then as the amount of data came around, and we found that, you know, these SQL databases were really hard to tune and partition the data so that we get the performance and handle the massive amounts of data that existed. Some of these NoSQL databases came about and provided, you know, this data lake approach to handle the non-structured data, as well as the massive amounts. But even there, we had some issues with, and still do, with the administrative costs of this, whether it be creating new clusters or, you know, transformation of the data from one to the other. And we've got, you know, the data in one state here and the data in another state there. And how do we, you know, do data governance and quality around that? And so what Snowflake did is, several years back, they came back and said, look, we've got the cloud and it has removed the physical limitations, and let's build a data warehouse solution that is built upon the cloud and takes advantage of those cloud capabilities, whereas all of the other ones really have evolved from the on-premise, and so they've taken advantage of the cloud, but they're still, to a large degree, built upon the same technologies that existed before, where compute and storage were married to one another and could restrict you. Next slide. So again, this kind of gives you what, you know, depending on how long you've been around and how robust your infrastructure, your architecture is, you may have various silos and stages of your data, and data living in different technologies and databases, SQL and NoSQL databases, and transformation. So it gets it's challenging to monitor that, to manage it, do the data operations, and all of those things. Next slide, please. So really, again, what you end up with is you have a lot of time spent dealing with infrastructure, whether it be setup, patching, licensing, making sure you're up to date on all of those things, managing your storage, managing your security across multiple storage mechanisms and tool sets. You have your time spent on physical design, whether it's partitioning, you know, reclustering, indexing, doing things to make the data accessible more quickly. Similar on the query tuning, managing the memory of your SQL databases or your parallelism, keeping people from stepping on one another as, you know, your data scientists are doing one thing and your business users are trying to get their reports. And then finally, there's availability and maintenance, right? I have to make sure I have replications. I have to have backups. If I want to give something to my dev and QA folks, I have to create a backup and restore. So that takes time. And across all these things, again, I have the various accounts that I have to manage. Next slide. So what Snowflake said was, gosh, let's just load the data and query the data. Let me, Snowflake, manage all of these other things for you, just as many cloud providers do in terms of, you know, providing you the resiliency and the multi-region availability and all of those things. Snowflake has taken those cloud characteristics and things that have made your life easier from an infrastructure standpoint, and they've built a data warehousing solution on those and taking advantage of those. Next slide, please. And so what you end up with in the end is you have your same data sources on the left, your data consumers that Dan has talked about on the right, but all of your data is on Snowflake for all of your data applications, from your engineering down to your applications and, you know, the data exchange and data sharing that Nan talked about previously. And again, Nan noted that Snowflake is compliant, or, you know, runs on all three major platforms: GCP, AWS, and Azure. Next slide. And how do they do that? So briefly, I'm just going to talk about the architecture because it's key to what they do and what it allows you to do. First of all, they've got a cloud agnostic layer there at the bottom, right? That just manages whatever cloud you're on. Then they've separated the storage from the compute. And that is transformational. And we'll get into why that's transformational. But not only that, but in their storage, where they're using, cloud storage. So you have the unlimited availability of the storage, but their storage model is unique, and that what they do is they manage pointers to the data rather than allow updates of the data. So all of the data rights are immutable, and they just manage these pointers. And so what that does is that removes the read-write contention that on so many traditional databases exist today. And it also provides other capabilities, which again, we'll get to. So the next layer then wrapped around that is the compute layer, which just for terminology purposes, they call warehouses. So not to confuse that with, the general term of warehouses, but when they say warehouse in Snowflake, it's your compute layer. And what they've done there is because they've separated the storage from the compute, you now can have many compute instances or warehouses accessing the same data. And not only that, those compute warehouses are scalable both vertically and horizontally. And not only that, you can assign users or user groups to specific warehouses. So again, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but that provides you incredible capabilities in terms of providing SLAs to your different types of users and right sizing each of those compute layers so you can provide the SLAs you've agreed to. And not only that, but you can track the costs. And then the final layer is the cloud services layer. So back one. So the cloud services layer is really the data warehouse as a service portion of it, right? So this is all of your query optimization, your management, your transactional services, your security, your governance, the metadata, and allows you the data sharing and the collaboration. So all that is wrapped around the compute and the storage layers. Right. So next. So why is this important and what is so transformational? So touched on these, but I want to call them out each one individually. So you have your storage and you have it wrapped around by your warehouses, your compute. So first of all, as we talked about, you have elastic scaling for your storage, right? Low cost, and low cost being, I think the quote is $23 per terabyte, compressed terabyte per month. But basically, Snowflake is passing the storage, the cloud provider storage costs on to you. But effectively, it is unlimited capacity and all the resiliency that your data cloud provider storage provides you today. Then around that, you have your elastic scaling, right? So the compute engines, like I mentioned, they're vertically and horizontally scalable. So it gives you that capability to provide whatever horsepower you need for whatever business purpose you have for that particular user group. And that gives you the ability, the next one being your performance SLAs, right? You now can guarantee, because you can scale and give the compute power to the people who need it. And then the other part, the next part is the test, dev, staging. What I alluded to this earlier is, because of the way they store the data, if you want to give a copy of your production data to your test or dev folks, they have this concept called zero copy cloning. So what it does, within seconds, you take your data, it creates a zero copy clone. Now your test group has it. No more backing up, hours of data, hours of backup and restore and all the management that goes with it. You click a button, or actually it's a SQL statement, and you create a test environment that those people can go play with as much as they want, and it is a version of the production data. And so at the end of the day, you have, I've mentioned vertical and horizontal, but this is all auto scaling too. So you can auto scale as your warehouses, the usage ramps up. Instantaneously, Snowflake will boot up additional ones as needed to handle your load. Next slide. So now I'm just going to talk kind of how that all fits into a functional model, and and how this all fits together in your overall architecture and your data solutions. So click. So first of all, you have your ingestion, right? So you can create a small warehouse or an extra small. So that just is an FYI. They basically have t-shirt sizing on their warehousing. Obviously, the smallest is smaller, less compute power, and cheaper. But what's important about that is you can scale it the way you want. And not only that, because of the way they have architected and they have their threading on the back end, you often, by breaking your large data sets into smaller pieces, can get much quicker performance with smaller, less costly warehouses than you would by throwing all of your data in one big file and putting a large warehouse. We actually had a case where we worked with a customer, and it was incredible, the difference, and both in time and cost. And the other thing I want to point about this one is, you'll notice there, we talked about structured and semi-structured data. So a really cool thing about Snowflake is they handle semi-structured data. So what I mean by that is JSON, XML, Parquet, Avro files. Ingest those directly into your warehouse, into your tables, and then they provide proprietary SQL statements that allow you to query that data, join on that data right out of the semi-structured data source. So you don't have to do any transformation for semi-structured data. So that is a really cool thing that I think you'd find a lot of value in. Click, please. Right, so then the other part of this is data transformation, right? You hear about ELT or ETL. So again, Snowflake says, get the data in, and then let's deal with it. So they always talk about ELT. Get the data in, we'll transform it in place, and you can also then assign warehouses of appropriate size for that transformation layer and separate that out. So while you're doing transformation, you're not affecting your data loading, you're not affecting any of your other apps. And then the one at the bottom there at the 6 o'clock, right, you have your finance app. So finance maybe is just pulling large amounts of data. So because it's a single data set or minimal data sets, you assign a large one to it, and that gives you the most efficient compute and cost, and allow them to pull data, the same data that you're working on in other areas, through their own compute. Click. Then you may also have a data science team. Again, as we talked about the different ways data is using. So these data scientists who typically just beat the living heck out of the data with their data models and tests. And again, the key is they are separate from everyone else, and they will not affect the performance of any of your other customers and users. Click.
If you don't have a team, right, it's only a matter of time. You're going to be getting one.
Right. And then, then again, we talked about your marketing analytics, so your BI stuff and your report and all that stuff. Again, point here being they're separate. They're not going to be affected by the other users. Click. And then again, we talked about the test and the dev. So you got your zero copy clone, all of this going on at the same time. And within a matter of seconds, you have a test version of your data that you can provide your test and dev. And at the same time, in a similar fashion, you now can share this data, again, not impacting anyone, to both your employees, your business customers, and then Snowflake has this whole other concept that Nan kind of alluded to in terms of the data sharing mart, right? So as more customers, you find customers or third parties that have data that is useful to you, you can now share that data. You can put your data that is useful and you might want to monetize, or just share with your business partners. And instead of it being, downloading files, creating backups, creating SFTPs, and then ingesting it, you share the data, they see a copy of the data, they can start using it immediately. So with all these users, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but it's important to note that within Snowflake, they have a very robust security model, all the way from the access layer, the infrastructure layer, and the data layer down to the data objects, and even row level and column level. So all of these things can be managed. And also the important thing to point out here is their support of many of the the standards, you know, the HIPAA, PCI, FedRAMP, all of those things, SOC compliant. So I couldn't have a technology discussion without talking about security a little. And then the other thing that's very important here is, you know, we talked about everything coming into Snowflake and maybe getting rid of, you know, existing technologies that you built along the way. But, you know, nobody's going to just turn a switch one day and all the infrastructure and investment you had is going to go away. The important thing is here is that Snowflake plays well with lots of existing things, companies and partners that you may have today. So there's no reason that this is a binary situation. You know, you build the solution and use the various tools for what they do well. But clearly, the more you can localize your data and provide a single copy of it that you can manage, the better off you're going to be in order to meet your data needs for your business. So just to kind of summarize and wrap up, the main points that I've been trying to get across here with Snowflake is it's one platform, it's one copy of data, many workloads, and those many workloads are independent of one another and they're not going to affect the other one. So all of these services, your data services that you may have or may have in the future, Snowflake can support them. So even if you don't have some of these, getting on Snowflake will eliminate the roadblock that you may face with other technologies. And it's all in the cloud. So it's, you know, it takes advantage of everything on the cloud and saves you the time for managing all of the infrastructure that you have today and really allows you to focus on data and getting the most value out of your data. And I think that's the end of, yes.
So thanks, Greg. So if you have questions, please submit that in the Q&A section from the standpoint. We have a few questions here. What would you say are 3 top business objectives that Snowflake addresses? I think there was one particular slide here. I'll just go back, Greg, so if you can address that. You know, I think it helps you make, go into presentation mode here. So I'd say this slide sort of has 3 exact points actually, surprisingly, but helps you make quicker decisions, right? And today it takes advantage of new insights, new customer experiences that you can create. And you can do all that at a very reduced cost, right? What was only possible for large companies, every company can tap into these new technologies and kind of drive those experiences and behave and act and, you know, serve customers just like the Googles and the Amazons do, right? So that requires a technology like Snowflake. So that's how I would answer that. The next question is, what steps do you recommend to get started with Snowflake?
So let me grab that one. Fire up an instance of Snowflake. I mean, you can go out to their website today. You can start a free trial. They give you credits and you can play with it until you use up those credits and need to put in a credit card, but you can get a lot done just playing with it, learning about it. And if you want to move on from there, then I would say, you know, define a POC. And when you define that POC, make sure that you have something real and something that's going to provide value, because, you know, just doing a POC just to prove that you can ingest data, you're really not going to get the uptake and the support from, you know, upper management unless you show them the real business value. So pick a POC that's going to show some business value.
So another question here is, how long does it take to realize the benefits of Snowflake? Time to migrate?
Yeah, I mean, the standard answer, right, is it depends. But it is incredibly easy to start ingesting data. Again, given that it is a SQL database, and there are, so if you have things like Mongo or whatever, there are tools for ways and documented ways for ingesting data. But if it's a SQL database, it's very easy to break it down into files. All you have to do is stage them and do a copy command. You recreate the whatever schema you need in Snowflake. You can ingest data, again, depending on the data and the size of the data and the scope of it. You know, within a day, you can have data in your Snowflake environment. Obviously, more complex and all those things, caveats apply.
So there's three more. Let's see if we can fit it in. Ronnie, what if I already have a big data implementation, like cloud data? Is there still a case for Snowflake? I can answer that, and I think so. Like, you know, in the past 24 months, companies focused on bringing data into a large data store. Big data was the magic word. And so they basically achieved the fact that they bring lots of data into a store. And now the value is becoming the question. Like, okay, I have data in my big data store. How do I drive insights? How do I do it faster? Is there quality in the data that we've collected, right? I'm paying lots of money for keeping this data alive in a particular instance, but what is the value to the business? So as that question becomes more pronounced, right, Snowflake is a great tool to help you reduce that OODA loops. You know, I have a hypothesis, I can take this data, work on it, and, you know, deliver that value. And you can keep compressing that from, you know, days and months to hours and minutes, generate those insights. So that's where I'd say Snowflake will play a tremendous role. So a couple of other questions. How does pricing work with Snowflake? And is it affordable for users with smaller volumes of data?
Yeah, I mean, it's cloud, so you pay as you use. That's the beauty of it. So, and not only that, you can size your warehouses accordingly, and they also have the capability to set alerts and limits, so you don't run up an unexpected cost. And I mentioned their storage is, they quote like $23 a compressed terabyte. So, you know, it's $23 a month for, that's, you know, that's a fair amount of data, especially if you're just getting started. You're not going to get that anytime soon.
Yeah, just to add, you know, but with respect to, you know, pricing, you know, there are basically two components. One is the storage and the other one is the compute. And the compute basically is only for what you use. There are capabilities within Snowflake, you know, wherein you can auto suspend. So you don't have to keep running your servers if you're not using it. So you end up saving a lot of, you know, cost there itself.
That's a great point, Varun. Thanks.
So those were the questions we had. I see a couple of questions pop up. We can answer some of these offline as well. We'll capture these and send it to you. We'd like to send you a quick survey as well. We'd like some feedback, you know, any inputs, so we can improve our next webinar. We plan to do another series on the same topic, go into a little bit more detail. And if you have specific questions, just let us know. Happy to set up a no for conversation any point in time. So we are at 1. We appreciate your time and taking some time to spend and understand about, you know, modernizing your data warehouse. Thanks, and have a great rest of the day.